we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be. That's all on the ballot. The choice could not be more clear.
Welcome, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Remember to unmute yourself.
So glad to be here. Hi, Sydney.
So glad to be with you all. I'm Sid Harvey,
Yes.
the creator.
So great.
And it is such an honor to be with you guys. Oh, look,
Glad
we
to
got
be
Batman.
here.
Hey, Patrick. Hey, Mark. Susan Dora.
Yes, hello.
I'm
Batman's
here.
in the house.
Yay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Good.
So we are
Hello.
officially live on
Hello,
Facebook.
hello.
For everyone who's here with us, you are officially live on the social media digital world universe. And I would love to introduce Artemis because he is the pioneer behind this event and gathering, and he has invited some amazing individuals tonight to talk about some very important issues, especially with what's coming up in the next few days. Artemis, whenever you're ready.
Well, what an honor to be together. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Am I audible? I have such a pleasure to introduce such a dear friend, Jarrett Bouillon. Siri translates your name as Bug Lion, which is so funny. But I'm so honored that we are presenting you in the first Rolling with Artemis to talk about your work around cults. And, I am tonight dressed as Cult Dracula.
Woohoo.
And, but I'm very excited to have Jarrett here and, and a team of wonderful people that you have brought to us to talk about cults and how that's connected to what's happening in our election today. And without further ado, I just want to present my dear friend and my darling Jarrett. Please introduce yourself, share your work, and then introduce your team of people who are here with you. And we'll start.
Okay. Hey, I am just so delighted to be part of the spontaneity that Artemis, you always bring into life, no matter what is happening, there's spontaneity. That's the one thing we can count on. Well, a few other things too, love, joy, zest for life, all of that. And I am just so happy to be here. That you would dedicate a few evenings at this time to coming together with friends, to having a little bit of a presentation, which I guess we'll do that. And also, to really get to be with each other at this extraordinary time in our lives, in history. So it's possible. I see that my very dear friend and colleague, Mark Laxer, is with us tonight. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Mark, he is kind of coming with something a little mysterious. I'm not quite sure who he is this evening, but I believe we may get to hear a few words from him later. And I see, yes, some other good friends here, including possibly Sonia, my daughter. I don't know if that's a different Sonia or not. But my family, Frederick, others are here. I'm really grateful to have you all here. And man, do you know that today, right now, this evening, if we look out our windows in North America, it's a Halloween harvest blue moon. And that you would actually choose to come and spend some time with us in this collective tonight is like super exciting. I feel really honored. And here we go. I'm going to just talk for a little bit this evening. Glad you're all here. I want to mention that another dear friend, new friend and colleague of mine, Stephen Hassan, might be popping in. And Sid, if you could just be aware if Steve does pop in, we're just going to kind of put a pause. He is a leading cult expert in the United States here. He has an incredibly busy schedule, and he's going to try to pop in for a few minutes between dinner with friends as well as an interview this evening. So he's got a lot going. So hopefully he can pop in and we'll have a few words with him. So this idea, I also just want to acknowledge that on the Facebook page, the event page that Artemis and Patrick created, it actually has the photograph, the cover of Steve Hassan's book, The Cult of Trump. So that's kind of our theme this evening, is our cult dynamics and how they're playing out in our current administration. So as people come on in, just welcome. We're glad to have you here. And I'm going to give you just a brief backstory about my personal experience and why I'm here to kind of talk cults. It's actually, like my favorite topic to talk about. And that is because I have personal experience with being part of a cult for over 18 years. I was in what I call an everyday cult. I'll give you a little bit of a picture of what an everyday cult is over these next few minutes. But for 18 years, I was involved in a group that I thought was the cat's meow. I learned a lot, I grew a lot, and I also lost a lot. I had no idea that I was actually giving away parts of my autonomy. I was losing my capacity to use discernment for decision making in my own life. I made decisions that I regret. And I truly experienced what we call in the cult education circles mind control. So I was a victim of mind control. It was something that took place over the course of a number of years. For me, my experience, for some people, it can happen very quickly, but it never happens overnight, or rarely happens overnight. Shouldn't never say never. So I have a book that's coming out in May called An Everyday Cult, and that book will really share my story. For this evening's purpose, I'd like you to, there might be a few specific stories that will come out through our conversation this evening. But what I just want to set the tone this evening, that I was 34 years old when I actually became actively involved in the group. And I'm not public about the group that I was a part of. It was a psychological, new agey self-help group. And I'm college educated. I was, I've always been someone really passionate about connecting with people, doing good things. And, I entered it as a, normal person. And over the course of 18 years, I lost significant parts of my capacity, like I said, my capacity for discernment. And I snapped out of it. A beautiful group that was in life. I suddenly heard one friend of mine was being severely verbally abused. And in that experience of recognizing that she was telling the truth, and that she was being hurt badly, abused by the man that I had put up on a pedestal as my teacher. That created a disconnect in my psyche. And I call that the crack that let in the light. And just like that gorgeous Leonard Cohen song. So this when I, over the course of the weeks immediately after this snapping experience, where I left my teacher, I left the group that I was a part of. I focused more on my own life and my own healing. Throughout this time, it was like I was given new eyes to see. And I looked around my world, and on literally every level of society, in groups of all kinds, I saw the exact same power dynamics that were playing out in terribly unhealthy ways. And so it was like this huge awakening to cultic dynamics as they manifest in the world. Some of it is, we think of a cult as something like, Jonestown or David Koresh in Waco, Texas. But what I've come to experience and know in my heart and mind to be true is that these dynamics can take place in small groups, in large groups, in governments, in families. And if I have actually come to dedicate my life to furthering education about the kinds of these kinds of dynamics that can become really destructive. So seeing this, having this experience of seeing these dynamics being played out was quite powerful as Mr. Trump joined the scene in American politics. And, back in November of 2016, 4 years ago, nearly almost right now, a few days after the election, I wrote a blog post that I titled, "Thank You, Donald." And in that blog post, I was writing, a sarcastic letter, to then President-elect Donald Trump, thanking him for his transparency, thanking him for showing all of us cult dynamics, these things that had been kept under the radar for so long, that now we could actually see them. They were out there in the light of day. And in that blog post, I referenced a document that was created by a psychologist. I can't remember the name. If you want it, I'll find the reference. But it was 50 Traits of a Dangerous Cult Leader. And I went through every single one of those 50 traits. And by golly, if that Mr. Trump didn't hit them all. So what were we in for? Well, now we know, because we've all lived it. We've all lived it, and now we're facing this extraordinary moment, not only in history, but also, I would, venture to guess, an extraordinary moment in each one of our lives as individuals, no matter how old you are today. If you're aware of this election, you're aware of the stakes that we're facing. It's huge. And, I sure hope that that Steve Hassan will be able to pop on for a little bit, because he has deeply studied the the dynamics that exist in the Trump administration. And that's not my forte. What I'm most passionate about is actually the experience of the American people. And I've really come to see that President Trump has used all those cult leader techniques to impact our reality as the American public. And one of the things that has been really curious to me is that it's hard for, I would say, I'd venture to guess, because this is being hosted by Artemis, that, most, if not all of the people here are supporters of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. But what I can tell you is that whether or not you're leaning liberally, lean liberal, or you're, a GOP diehard, we're all being impacted by the polarization that exists in our society right now. I mean, it's that polarization is one of the most divisive techniques that is being used, and it's not just that Trump is using it to rally his people to be in his field. Like, one thing a cult leader does is, galvanize his base. But every tweet, every time Mr. Trump opens his mouth or tweets, he is not only galvanizing his people, he's also separating us. He's placing a wedge in between all of us, creating a divide. And when we react to that with more, with the way that you might want to scream and say, wants us to do. So he's in power when we turn our back on our friends and neighbors. So the biggest thing that we can do as American citizens today, Trump wants us to see. He wants to put on those glasses. Like, I wore those glasses for many years when I was in a cult. I believed that my own family could not possibly understand me. I believed that because my cult leader taught me that. Over years, it was like a gradual process. And it got to that I did not go to my own brother's funeral. Instead, I went to a retreat offered by my teacher. It's that kind of separation that Trump is wanting to further in each one of us and in the relationships that we have. So we've got to be bigger than that. We have to stretch. And one of the, maybe I'll kind of open it up. I would love some dialogue. I'm super excited to have my dear friend and colleague Mark Laxer here tonight in a cult, and then seeing these cult dynamics playing out in the White House today. So he has
Absolutely.
a little movie that graphic. Yeah, Go ahead, Sid.
Apologies, there's a little bit of a delay, but I do think it would be a great opportunity to open it up. And just a reminder that everyone can share questions in the chat, in the Zoom chat. So we do have a few comments there, Jarrett, if you want to check that out as well. I see the characteristics of a cult leader. I'm concerned now with what leads people to join a cult. So I actually had a similar question. Because of your background, you had more of an antenna than a lot of us do, maybe on this call and in the world. So maybe you could shed light on, you know, that piece, or anyone else. Feel free to chime in.
Well, you know, there's a beautiful line, motto that we have in the cult world that's like, no one joins a cult. No one. We join a good thing. Desire for to belong, you know, motivates us to become to connect with others. So you know, as a cult, until we've left, if it's a destructive one. And you know, it's a process. Like, one of the greatest misnomers of, you know, beyond cultic beliefs is that you have to be desperate or vulnerable, or at some kind of broken place in your life to join a cult. And that is just absolutely not true, my friends. In fact, cults actively recruit, you know, high achievers. They need high achievers to further the mission. So think about how, you know, how we get hoodwinked, how we can get schnookered by a good salesperson. You know, I think some people are naturally more vulnerable. I've learned that one of the greatest assets to human character is to have a healthy dose of sarcasm and skepticism. I was not a skeptical person until coming out of the cult. So that's part of discernment that has grown in me. But I'm still an incredibly loyal person. I'm not giving that up. My loyalty was turned against me. So my leader saw that I was I could be very, you know, I could be devoted. And I tell you, he really used that, and it worked. So really,
And how does that translate to Trump right now? How does your experience what happened to you translate to what's happening to the world?
well, you know, and you know, Mark, I really want to invite you to jump in here at any point. What I see is that he had a following, you know, kind of coming into the White House, and there was, you know, there were, I think, a lot of different factors. You know, the whole, for example, the evangelical Christian community is part of it. Is that that there were, I call it the propaganda machine, that there were so many, that the idea machine, their sympathies, and that made them all the more. Now, you know, one of the things I was hoping, if Steve makes it tonight, is I think that the phenomenon of QAnon, which I'm not qualified to speak about because I just don't know enough about it, but Steve has done a really deep dive in that world. That is a propaganda machine. So it's been just kind of galvanizing people's psyches, like siphoning off your level. Mark, go ahead. Do you want to jump in there?
Sure. Can people hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I got thumbs up. Hi, everybody. Good friend of Durette's. We work together in cult education, and I just got back from a Halloween party as I think I was a Jawa. And I had a life preserver on because I was Jawa on vacation, but I took the life preserver off. So to start with, Durette, that was a great introduction. Thank you for that. I thought I'd chime in and say, when I think back at the history of the United States, looking at the maybe meta picture here for a moment, I think about the formation of the United States, and they say that the prisoners went to Australia and the religious fanatics came here. And I think there's some truth to that. I think the United States was founded by kind of, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but just sort of being a bit accurate here, by religious fanatics. And I think that has set us up, culturally speaking, as a nation, to be kind of, we are a cult. America is a cult. And the only thing that we can't really discuss here is that we are a cult. It's taboo. It's the most bizarre thing. And this goes along with, I think, was it Sydney? You were asking a question, I believe, about how do we tie in what Durette's saying with Donald Trump a bit more directly? Well, it ties in a number of ways, I think. It ties in the sense that if you have something to educate people about regarding cults, in terms of protecting the young people, the 17-year-olds making a transition to college, and the cults are just waiting there for your kids to suck them in, or in terms of a political cult, someone like Donald Trump, we're so vulnerable as a people, more than Australia, more than New Zealand, more than England, more than France, more than Brazil, more than anywhere. I've traveled a bit on this planet, and no, I don't really travel wearing these clothing, but I've traveled a bit, and I've never seen a people more vulnerable to cult leaders. And if you try to get your story out, and if, for example, Steve Hassan, who Durette's mentioned a number of times, good friend of mine, and I do hope he joins this call, he wrote a wonderful book, I highly recommend it, called The Cult of Trump. Well, I've had many discussions with Steve about his book, and then I put out a book that I'm sharing for free. It's called Rama, Trauma, Trump. I left the cult. And now look what happened. Well, here's the funny thing. If you've got something that can educate people, young people, old people, red state people, blue state people, no one cares. The media doesn't care. The powers that be, they don't care. It's taboo to teach people about cults. And therein lies the problem.
Yeah, Mark, one sec. Like I just want to give you all the context that Mark has created this, educational, very accessible book, and has done for free. This is free online. Anyone can access it. It is just purely for educational purposes. He and I and others have worked to try to get the acknowledgement of some and they're cult experts he was having trouble getting people to read The Cult of Trump, even though it was a book that he was asked to write. Like
He was, so
there was-
Jarrett, yes. So Steve has been published by Simon and Schuster. And Simon and Schuster, it's a brilliant book. This should be on the New York Times bestseller list. And cults are so taboo in our society.
Right.
And maybe it's taboo because our religious institutions and our political institutions are so close to being expressing cultic behaviors that people can't discuss it. It's just the most bizarre thing. And so anyway, I don't know if Sydney, if that in part addresses your question. How does this have to do with Donald Trump? Well, we are a nation ripe for creating personality cults where what are some of the characteristics of a destructive cult? Not a cult, but a destructive cult. Well, one of them is you create around you a disinformation bubble, and you basically gaslight people so that where there's no facts, there's no physical factual reality. And this is exactly what Donald Trump's cult is all about. And you gaslight, what is gaslighting, folks? Gaslighting is a very powerful psychological tool where you just drop a brick on someone's foot and you say, oh, I just dropped that on your foot. And then you say, how could you do that? And they say, do what? And you say, you just dropped a brick on my foot. And you just told me you did. And you look at them and you say, I did not. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. And that's what Trump does at least 10 times a day. That's one of the characters. Go for it, Dre.
So
Yeah.
my big question is, for me, I resonate with this a lot, but there are people out there who don't see it. So how do we bridge that gap?
Thank you, Sydney. I don't know, Jarrett, you're coming in and out for me, so I don't know how your internet's doing. The way we bridge it, Sydney, is through education. I find more and more that people don't read books. I have a book out for free.
That is a great question.
Okay, I don't know. The internet's kind of weird here. Through education, people are not reading, so you try to get it in 140 characters over a tweet or something like that. There are many ways to educate people. The problem is that there are no institutions in the United States for seriously educating people about cults. I'm sorry, Jarrett, is your internet working there?
Can you hear me okay now?
It's not really. I don't know if anyone else
Yeah,
can hear.
I recommend.
I'm having a problem with it.
Taking your video off, Jarrett. If you take your video away, there'll be less processing, and so we might hear your audio better.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
I would love to jump in if I may. And Mark, thank you so much for your distinctions. When I think about the Trump, I think about exactly what you said: disinformation, a new kind of factual reality.
Now? Okay.
And I think the real problem is that we don't know the difference between opinions and facts. That we think our opinions are facts. And we really, this is a major human problem, that we think that opinions and facts are the same thing. And this is why false news and what Trump has done to discredit the media is so powerful as a undemocratic act, is that he's invalidated everyone's reporting by just calling it all fake news. And that I think is part of this pattern, Mark and Jarrett, of how a cult leader operates.
Yes, Artemis, I totally agree with that. And if I could just bring in a couple of countries to bear, I mentioned Australia and England. You know, we came from England and the religious fanatics came over here the prisoners went to Australia. Just to bring in two other countries, Artemis, I just, in terms of addressing what you just said, I think that Russia is behind a lot of this confusion that's going on right now, the disinformation. But there's another country I want to bring into bear. Many of us read the news, and many of us understand what Vladimir Putin is doing through Trump, through Facebook, through this unregulated social media. The country that we're not discussing, Artemis, is a wonderful country, and I love this country. The country is called France. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a philosophy called deconstructionism, which in my mind set this whole, going to what you just said, Artemis, about what's the difference between opinion and fact. Well, this whole thing, this whole notion of if you drop a brick on someone's foot, well, a lot of people now are saying, well, no, that's just your reality. There is no objective reality. This came from France, or at least in part, it came from France, is philosophy of deconstructionism. Now, France doesn't necessarily like McDonald's or Disneyland. So they, in a cultural war with the United States, they sent us deconstruction through our university program. And so you had all these wonderful graduate writing programs. It came from Yale University. That's how it started. And it spread across all the universities and spread through our academic world in the United States. And it stuck, and the French people were just laughing their heads off. Those stupid Americans, they actually believe in this stupid shit. And what happened was, we now are a nation where we do not accept, we think it's all in our, it's like this new agey hocus pocus mushy stuff in our head. So we can't differentiate fact from opinion. I don't think that came from Putin. I think it came from France.
So we have a good question from Chandra, which is, who is benefiting from this chaos?
Very good question.
Of course, Chandra would ask that. So, who is benefiting? That's one of the things. Mark and I have a great companion, Marcy. We have worked together for a number of years in cult stuff, and Marcy created a chart that we call, oh shit, what was it, Mark? Anyway, it's a chart in which we list all the traits, all the things to be aware of if you're getting interested in a group. And one of the things, can you guys hear me or no?
It's not great.
Not
I would
really.
recommend using data over Wi-Fi, using your phone to dial in if you can.
Trying to get that set.
Jarrett, you could, this is Joseph, you could go to your mute, go to the little menu next to your mute button. You can say, it'll say switch to phone audio. So try that.
Perfect. Great idea.
And while we're waiting, I just want to make a distinction also about the French. René Descartes, Descartes, he said, to think, therefore I am. And I think what we're going to learn is that to feel, therefore I am, that humans are largely emotional beings. And the only time we reason with each other is we're not threatened. And so part of what Trump has created is a threatening environment where everyone's on edge, including his own people. And what I'm advocating is that we learn to see ourselves as emotional beings first. And then when we feel unthreatened, we can do great things. We can come up with peace. We can come up with ways of connecting. But the problem is we're so triggered by each other. We're so emotionally upset with each other that there's no reason in our conversations.
I have a
It's
little bit of a different
true, and that.
frame. Well,
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt anyone. I'm just thinking that there was a firmament there waiting for someone like Trump of disaffected people. And they're going to still be there when Trump goes away. So I'm more concerned with the other end of the cult kind of dynamic. And that is the people that join a cult, because these people were sitting there waiting for someone like this or anyone. So I'm seeing it partly as a failure of progressives or Democrats. So I'm thinking more in a political frame. This is a twist for me to the cult frame of looking at what's happening. So I'll listen and try to
I love
piece
that.
it
Chris,
in for
you
myself.
introduce yourself. Chris, introduce yourself, because
Oh,
you are a tremendously wise person, and you understand the meaning of freedom more than almost anyone I know. So how is what we do when we go dancing together different from what we're experiencing in the politics?
well, it's just a human thing. So I'm not any really exceptional in any way other than understanding my humanity the way any of us do. So I feel pretty mediocre in everything. And I'm proud of it.
Interesting that you mentioned the frame or the narrative of cult not resonating with you. What do you see
It's new to me. I'm not saying it doesn't resonate.
Okay, it's new. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could support Chris, Trump has played on what I perceive as legitimate grievances among white working class people. The Nobel laureate Angus Deaton and his wife have created evidence to show that there are high levels of depression, alcoholism, drug taking among white working class. The pathologies are similar to the inner city African American communities. And yet the Democratic Party that wants to champion working class people, describe them as a basket of deplorables, or Obama made fun of their, Sundays, religious guns. So when you're ridiculed by one party, it allows people like Trump or Fox News to come in and say, well, the elitists don't like you. They're making fun of you. In fact, people like Laura Ingraham say, they're not making fun of Trump, they're making fun of you. I've heard her say it. So it resonates because there are real problems that they have and they're not being addressed. When you go from 1950, when a third of all jobs were manufacturing, to about 10% now, those are jobs that legitimately might have been done here, but economic theory said it would be better for our society that they were outsourced, better for corporations. So people are angry. They see their incomes going down. They see rising inequality. They see an elite group of people making extraordinary amounts of money. And the 2008 recession really hurt them. And they saw the bankers and everybody getting off free. Nobody went to jail. And they, supported Obama in many cases because he was an outsider. Then they supported Bernie. And then they supported Trump. It seemed incredible. The same group of people were doing that. But they were looking for a champion. And as crazy as Trump is, they felt at least he was angry and upset and on their side. And the other side was talking, I agree with Artemis, they were talking logic and constitutions. They have to be pissed off. Yeah, you're right. You're getting screwed. And that's why they like Bernie. Bernie was angry, So it's emotions. They're not following the Mueller investigation every night with Rachel Maddow and every nuance. They're watching Hannity scream and yell. And they like that because that's...
Larry, please introduce yourself and your work on George Washington and what you think George Washington would say about this moment.
Well, he would say he saw it all before. In the first 10 years of our country, we were very divided. We were coming out of literally 150 or 60 years of being Virginians or people from Massachusetts. And suddenly there was this constitution, which was, the law and procedures. And what Washington did was he traveled the country. He came to Boston and watched a parade. He went everywhere to show people that they had to come together. And when he left the presidency, he wrote the farewell address where he talked specifically that people will come to divide you. They will pit you against each other, but don't fall for it. And he said that as somebody who had watched men die on the battlefield and knew what it took to even get to that degree of unanimity. And he would also not be surprised that we're still dealing with structural racism, because it was basically established in those first 10 years largely by Thomas Jefferson. Right. He created a legal framework that the South basically took into the 1830s and eventually led to the Civil War. So we're replaying the same sort of structural issues that are, embedded in our very being. And so it's sort of time. The good thing about all this chaos and all this disruption, it's a point where we may be able to finally grapple with what does it mean to give all citizens equality, and what do we have to do to have African Americans fully participate in our society. And I agree with Artemis, unless we can create some kind of emotional field where we can see each other not as partisans but as fellow citizens. Washington started the farewell address by saying he addressed fellow citizens from an old and affectionate friend. I mean, language like that in 1796 was almost inconceivable. No king would say an old affectionate friend to my fellow citizens. I mean, so we've got to get that term embedded in ourselves and get away from, in my view, it's just as bad what Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell do. They have their cults who tune in every night to see the logic and the constitutional arguments. And then you switch to Fox and then see the crazy people over there talking about, well, Lord Fauci, attacking the good doctor like he's a despot. So they both have cult followings. That's why the ratings are so high. And we got to create a new form of communication where people talk to each other and they do it in respectful terms. And I don't know what that form is, but I suspect that the part of the cult nature of our time is that our communication is so fragmented that during and just before World War II, Bing Crosby had a radio show that 50 million people listened to. There were only 3 radio channels. So when we went into war and Bing sang White Christmas and Franklin Roosevelt came on the radio once a week, we united around those voices. We shared that emotional experience all over the country, and we don't share anything anymore. We don't.
So Larry,
hear anybody.
I'm sorry, I have a question there, Larry. So I'm wondering, in terms of, you're mentioning Maddow show is sort of a cult, and then the Hannity whatever is a cult. But I'm sort of thinking, do you have a sense that fact checking, and I mean, do you have a sense that both sides are equal? Do you have a sense that facts, like for instance, I'm just gonna make something up for a second. Yeah. If I said, by the way, I have a lot of friends who are Republican. I happen to be a Democrat, but whatever. It's like I love the United States. I love the people I disagree with. But if I said to you, Larry, let's just say that my girlfriend's a doctor. She works in New York City, and she's seeing a lot of people dying. Okay, she works in Elmhurst, Queens. So if I said, there's numbers, there's cadavers. They have these big trucks that they pull dead bodies out of. And I said to you, hey, Larry, there's this little microbe. It's really hard to see. And it's killing a lot of people, not just here, but in Italy and Brazil and all over the place, Indonesia. And we have to put on masks and things like that. And less people will die from that. And then you have someone else that says, just makes up something like, I don't know, I'm just gonna be a bit silly. So bear with me, I'm sorry. I am a chicken and I fly through the air and everybody has to smoke pot and jump up and down like, you know, I like eating bran muffins and that's gonna cure everything. And then the scientists who've spent, just bear with me 1 second, Larry. You have scientists who've spent their whole lives focusing on these little tiny microbes. And they are saying, all of them, you have to put on masks, otherwise it's going to be like another 100,000 dead. And someone else says, oh, I am the best person since Abraham Lincoln, and and they just make crazy shit up. In your mind, are those the same kind of cults?
Well, no, but they're the same kind of shows. So it's the Rachel Maddow show. And if you watch Fox, when Hannity finishes, Laura Ingraham goes, that was a great show, Sean. They're people, the same people. They look right into the camera. They're behind the desk. They start with a monologue. They attack, you know, Rachel attacks Trump every night. Hannity attacks the media every night. It's a show. And they're very lucrative. Fox made $2 billion in profit last year. They got millions of people watching it. So even though Rachel Maddow is way smarter and better educated than Sean Hannity is, she follows a certain perception of reality, which is logic, the law, you know, history. And Sean Hannity just makes shit up, but it's still a show. You like the logical, rational show, or NPR show, PBS show, or do you like the crazy Hannity Laura Ingraham show? But it's TV. It's, you know, people are entertained. My point is that the disaffected white working class, which at its most extreme are QAnon and these other these very violent cults, are largely all white, largely male. They're very disaffected from our society. And they have been abandoned by the Democratic Party, although Joe Biden, because of his own background, has tried to embrace them. You know, the party has realized you just can't throw away the white working class. But the analysis that's going on right now is the Democratic Party will be the party of the elites, the Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg party of the high-tech world, and the Republicans will be the white working class party. A complete switch of the historical role. You know, Republicans are always pro-business, and Democratic Party is pro-labor. And, you know, it has to do with political power. When you have 10% of the population in unions as opposed to 40% in the 50s, people who are in the lower end of our society are getting screwed. They're getting screwed right now. The trend lines of the last 8 months, the top 25% of our society who've been able to work at home, their income is going up, their wealth is going up because they're buying houses. You know, the housing market is moving, and the bottom 25 is going down. The gap, Reed Sakara showed it, the gap between them has grown even greater. And during the 2008 recession, it was pretty parallel. Both sides were getting really hit by the economic dislocation. So I think cult leaders, Adolf Hitler, I don't know cult on the micro level, but I know a figure like Hitler came along at a point where the Germans felt very weak. They felt overwhelmed. Inflation was at 500%. They had no idea what to do. And the aristocrats and the generals were failing them. And Hitler came, you know, he was charismatic like Trump, and he was yelling and screaming like Trump. And they said, well, maybe he knows. He's strong. Maybe he'll lead us out of this. So they followed him because there was no other choice. And I think hopefully Biden will be able to address their needs and over time maybe show compassion. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to say, you know, I'll be the president of all the people. I'm hearing you. I'm listening to you. I was one of you. I've come from, you know, working class background in Pennsylvania. So
Well,
I think
Hey, Larry, can you guys hear me at all now or no? This is Jarette. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
sound good now. Yeah.
Okay,
All right, I'll
great.
stop talking.
Yeah, no, this is great. I apologize. Obviously, you know, I've got something wonky going on with the Wi-Fi, but one of the things that's coming up for me is I'm hearing you talk, Larry, and I'll say first off that, you know, you have obviously a lot more expertise in what you're or understanding of what you're talking about, and I know very little about it. But one thing that might be helpful in the context of this conversation is that, you know, when you're talking about like a Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity, like there are personality cults. And sometimes a personality cult is something that can actually be harmless, you know, like where someone is following a musician who they are just like it can actually be a really good thing to have someone you follow that you feel a part of, that it's a kind of, you know, you're engaged, you feel creative, you feel like you belong to a group. And that's really, really different than what Trump is doing. Because what Trump is doing, like we can identify many different techniques that are actually destructive to the psyche of an individual. Where he is, you know, he is messing with people's minds and sense of reality. Rachel Maddow is not doing that. And I don't think Sean Hannity, you know, I don't follow it enough to know, but, you know, there's something that's like when you're altering reality, like the way that, okay, so Trump will, you know, change, he can say 50 different things about the same topic. And each time, like if you are already aligned with him, your whole psyche ping-pongs with him. And that is actually, that actually kind of erodes the psyche. It erodes your capacity for critical thinking. Where you know, Rachel Maddow, or even, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like some big musician. Who's a bigwig musician right now?
Well, I'm a deadhead. Does that count?
Yes, of course. You know, like exactly. You know, like we can, like loyalty is a good. You know, that's a fine thing. But if we look at, okay, like not only, you know, Mark, feel free to jump in here if there are other techniques. But I'm thinking. The polarization I already talked about, this wedge that he creates, dividing family, dividing, you know, the lying liberals from the patriots. You know, everything that Trump says is divisive. And and any time we feel divided, we allow ourselves to feel divided, Trump has won in some small way. So we have to actively work to bridge that. The language, every time, like every cult leader has a lingo, and that lingo has a very specific kind of power to it that people align themselves with, and so it's not like do you know the way Trump will actually take a very complex system and break it into have these like simplistic responses to it? Like all cult leaders do that. They want to take very complex and nuanced things and make them like, oh, this is it. Part of me is wondering if it would be helpful at this moment. I don't know what our time is here, but we might want to take a peek at Mark's, but we can decide. You guys, I want to, you know, hear from more people, but you might want to, it might be kind of cool to see some of the, because Mark's graphic novel actually will teach you some of those techniques that we're talking about now. What do you think? Maybe people could give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I think it's an 18-minute video, or we could see the 1 minute.
So Yeah, feel free to throw the thumbs up on the Zoom if you guys are interested in that. We're at 8 p.m., so we have an hour left to connect here.
What I would love is for everyone who's in the room, I think we have 23 people, to just introduce themselves and make a statement about what they're learning, what they think, what they agree with, what they don't agree. So I just love everyone who would like to speak, to be invited to say something, and just say your name and why you're here and what's inspiring you.
Thank you, Artemis.
Or you can share that. If you'd prefer to not show your video and speak, you can also share that information via the chat. But we can do popcorn style. So whoever has not yet introduced themselves, feel free to unmute and show your video and share why you're here.
I would like to talk for a moment on building upon the good things in life. There are many theories that people can have, but deep down from the soul, things are right or things are wrong. When you hurt people at your expense, you already have lost the battle as far as I'm concerned. I'm Amelie Diamant Armstrong, one of the diamond triplets. I'm very proud to be a triplet. Her sister Evelyn is a doctor. My sister Marion is in heaven. She wrote a wonderful song, Hello World. And I have committed my time to writing books to inspire people to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. My series is called the Courtship of Life series. And the reason that I say the courtship of life is because I honestly believe we need to court each other. We don't need to fight each other. I'm so happy to say, and I'm saying it in very few words, so a lot of people can talk. I've written a song called Be a Mensch. And it means to me that if you are a mensch, a total human being, you not only save yourself, you save hundreds and thousands of people by taking care of them and respecting them. Let me just quickly sing the thing. Be a mensch, be a mensch, be a mensch. Oh, a mensch is a person who shares and who cares. A mensch is a person who is knowledgeable and kind. A mensch is a person who speaks his own mind. Be a mensch, be a mensch, be a mensch. Oh, a mensch is a person who believes in respecting all races, all religions, all lifestyles. You don't have to be other people. You have to respect them and support them and bring them out of misery if they're in misery. Share and care. A mensch is a person who shares and who cares. Be a mensch, be a mensch, be a mensch. And finally, a mensch is a person who calls and promotes courage and hope. Be a mensch, be a mensch, be a mensch. And I'm happy to say that Artemis Tchaikovsky is a total mensch. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelie.
Now, I want to say that I'm part of the mensch cult. I am part of the love cult. And that's different because as Amelie said, it's about the liberation of the human spirit. Everyone has to find their liberation.
And when Annie Birdie calls you a mensch, you're a mensch.
Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, to mute. David, were you going to say something?
Well, first of all, my name's David Hills, and I think it's fun to know where people are too. So my wife, who's in the background, Catherine, and I are in Durham, New Hampshire. And so Emily, if that's your name, you know, very hard to follow that song. But I like to, I have been a matchmaker in my life. And I thought, Catherine, wasn't I called a mensch for my
Well,
matchmaking?
you were called a mensch by a beautiful Jewish woman who, for that reason, and also for your spirit and generosity.
Well, anyway, I just think in the time of stress that we're all experiencing right now, counting down the whatever it is, days or weeks before we know what happens with the election, it's really nice that our crazy friend Artemis decided to put this together to bring us all together and have a way of connecting and letting off some of the tension. And it's just like, I mean, Catherine and I both got rapid testing today because we were exposed to somebody who tested positive for COVID. So, you know, and we both tested negative so far for the rapid test. So it's just a wild time, and happy to meet you all, and happy to be part of Artemis's Love Fest and exchanging of ideas. And I've already been really touched and also impressed by what people have shared. I don't know, I think I need to go back to college or go to something where I learn more about history, because I'm always amazed what I missed growing up when I was supposed to be paying attention about history. So Larry, when you shared part of what you shared, I just was like, oh man, I just really, it's like quenching a thirst to hear people who are knowledgeable and sharing. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, David.
And David Hill needs to talk a little bit more about why he loves not just the Obama-Harris ticket, but in New Hampshire, where you're from, what is it about this election that's exciting you?
What's exciting me is the sign. Hold on. This excites me. We live on a farm and we have lots of fields, and we're on Route 4, which gets 16,000 cars a day. And so all people running for office covet our field because it has such visibility. Now that's a sign that we have many signs, but that's a sign that Catherine would not let me put up. But one thing that also excites me about signs, and it's not what Artemis asked, but is that I'm very fond of putting American flags next to my 4x8 Biden poster. And we have an American flag in the same field right above a Biden flag. So I just really encourage people to share with other people that somehow Republicans seemingly have co-opted the American flag. And I think it was already declared on this call by somebody about being a patriot. Maybe it was Mark, and loving the country. And I think, you know, it would be really constructive for after the election for people to really feel that, you know, the country won the election. You know, democracy won the election. If we can get back to more of a sense of rule of law won the election. And so, I mean, being in New Hampshire is, you know, as you know, it's really obnoxious. We are a small state. We have almost no diversity of color, at least, and yet we're way outsized in terms of the attention that we get. And it makes no sense, except that's just the way it rolls in New Hampshire. So you get to meet people, and you don't have to write a check for $1,000 or $5,000. They come into your home. They kind of beg you to come in your home and spend time. So you get to know people early on, and that's the grassroots nature of New Hampshire politics. But I don't have anything more to add than that, Artemis. But twinkles to you.
Thank you.
Two other people. Noam Sender, my darling friend, is on the call. Will you introduce yourself and give us a little sense of why Jews love Trump so much and what is it about the cult of Netanyahu? Talk about that for just a moment, if you could, Norm.
Well, first, before I speak directly to that, I'd like to say that I am part of the Mensch tribe. My voice is a little bit hoarse from singing and bringing joy and upliftment during this very tense and unusual times where nothing is left unseen. We are bare and naked to the bone, seeing who truly we are. Whether it is here or in Israel, the incredible properties that we have as humans, our midot, our characteristics, the beautiful ones, the hope and love and compassion and care and greed and hate are so vividly bright in front of us. We've never seen them more in focus. It's astonishing. And I enjoyed really listening to Larry and Mark and David. And I'm missing one person who joined through the intellect and the mind to share history and percentages and explaining where we're really at. What I'd like to share, and Artemis, my dear friend of over 30 years, is that we have, despots and dictators and fascism is not unknown to us. So whether it's big America, or used to be big in terms of its values, with the orange Trump, or small Israel with a mini Trump called Netanyahu, it's all the same thing. But even in Israel, there's a big surge to oust that type of energy. So the fact that you convened us here, Artemis, and created a channel. Even creating a channel nowadays is like everybody can create a channel. It's nice that we're together. And the fact that Mark mentioned that he has a lot of Republican friends, I'd love to hear the kind of conversations that he might have with these people. But for me, I'll go back to Amelie. Dear Mensch, Thank you.
Shukran Katir. Shukran Katir. Spasiba Bashoya.
Afwan ya habibi. Afwan ya habibi.
Habibi, my darling.
Habibi.
Yes, that's what we need, is the more Habibi. Habibi means my darling in Arabic.
Yes.
I would love for Amelie to properly introduce herself, because I don't think people know that my grandmother helped her and her sisters come to America in 1939 and 40. And the word rescue is too strong a word in that sense, because Amelie was already rescued, but her sisters came here together and went to Portland, Oregon, because my grandmother was able to find someone in Portland that would take care of them until their parents came. And now Amelie 93 years old, is not just a vibrant part of the world, but is teaching us about love. And so Amelie, tell a little bit more of your family experience and how it relates to this issue of a cult. And how does it feel to you now as an American to understand the cult niche of any society in the context of being a mensch? The mensch is not the cult. The mensch is about individual liberation, where the cult is about performance and anxiety and conformity, and so every conversation where we lose ourselves, we are in a sense part of a cult. We are part of the cult of not listening to ourselves, or we're part of the cult of denying ourselves. And so I want to go back to this notion of what I call the pre-Socratic notion, Heraclitus, that every time we step in a river, it's a different river because we're a different observer. And my notion is of something called hermeneutics, meaning the study of interpretations, that there's no truth, that each of us have their own interpretations, and together in a dialogue, we create truth. We create our truth. And so Amelie, share your experience as a young girl and now as a woman leading your tribe, how that feels to you.
Artemis, I
I
think.
actually don't think I'm on.
Oh, okay. Well, I open that question to everybody then.
You were channeling her really well, Artemis.
Yeah.
Well, I
would like to point out just a major theme here that I'd love any other contributors to add to, which is the theme of love and fear. Obviously, technology and Donald Trump are playing on our innate animalistic fear tendencies, our tendencies to want to protect our lives. So I was wondering if anyone wanted to speak on how that translates to the political spectrum, or how we can bridge the gap between those who understand that idea and those who might be new to it.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh. Yep.
Yep.
I just got a weird noise. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Fear. Those of us who have, excuse me, experienced cultic abuse have lived in fear. That fear is perhaps the most powerful form of control that there is. It's used in controlling relationships all the time. And it's used, we're witnessing it being used in an entire nation. So the way that, so for example, this kind of, in many cults, there's what's called, an apocalyptic thinking, where there's like some mysterious end of the world that is going to come. And when either death, life, our sexuality, our sense, our security, our sense of home, when a powerful figure brings into the zeitgeist, into the psyche of a group of people, that something very fundamental is not secure. It creates this incredible sense of fear, and when a leader also is at the same time giving a way through, like, believe it or not, like every time Trump says, the vaccine is coming, we're turning a corner. The people that are truly his deep, deep followers, they believe that not because, they believe it because their mind is not fully their own. And it's really important that we don't judge them for that. It's that fear is motivating them. The fear has really usurped their, capacity for thinking. So I'm trying to think, Sid, there was something specific you said in the question that I also wanted to respond to.
Yeah, well, another individual brought up how George Washington spoke about his brothers or people and used the word affectionate and how that was so out of the ordinary back then. I think it is telling of our evolution as humans. Understand where we're operating from, like from fear or love, and we have, some of us at certain times, the ability what's going on inside of us and how do we respond. So you obviously have experience and you've studied this, and a lot of individuals here have as well. But then there are those who are not well versed in this idea and who are more readily victimized, therefore, potentially you could say that. So I think evolution is a big piece here, and I think both technology and certain kinds of leadership can either bring out that, more animalistic fear-based thinking, or it can bring out the love and the unity that we feel and we share here on this call.
Right. And, I think that's great, Sid. And I guess the one thing that I'll just add, and I'll stop talking, that when fear is in the forefront, there's, literally we go into that, fight, flight, or freeze mode. That is the quote unquote primitive part of our brain. So one of the things that has happened to the American people over these last 4 years is that not only have Donald Trump's followers been living very often in a, fight or flight mode, so has everyone else, because our security is threatened. So anything that we can do, we can think of it just from that very neurological and psychological perspective of, we have to calm the nervous system. Mm-hmm. We can put our hand, the simplicity of putting our hand on our own, abdomen or on our chest whenever we are feeling, anxious, which you turn on the news and, most of us feel anxious. So even right now, it's a way that we restore our humanity. Like, we can do that literally together. Like, we can put our hand on our chest right now, and what happens is our nervous system settles. And when our nervous system settles, we actually have access to so much more of our capacity to think, of our capacity to be human. And it's our humanness. It's literally our humanness that Donald Trump has taken away from so much of our people.
Yeah. And another piece is, I think Trump has, or the symbol, or whatever you want to call him in all of this, he's brought to light the issue with information ecology right now. I don't know if anyone wanted to touch on that, but Schmackenberger is an academic who speaks on spiral dynamics, or different planes of consciousness, and how we've, as humans, evolved over time to think more holistically, whereas a long time ago it was very, very much into thinking. And there's a lot of countries where that is still how people operate. But I do feel a shift, especially in my generation, of people thinking more holistically, more about the group, the whole. I don't know if anyone wanted to speak on that.
May I address something that Jarrett said about the humanity of and the individual, like even just holding our heart, our hand on our heart, and being a mensch. That's the same thing that Artemis was asking Emily earlier, and we're still talking about the same thing. And Sid, before we go to the aspects of consciously being in community and in groups, and how our consciousness shifts when we're in groups versus when we are individually with ourselves. So, of course, I think the problem that we have is that we are large communities of people, of individuals, of Homo sapiens that are influenced by rhetoric and by our basic limbic system of fear and also our compassion and our love and our ability to transcend our fear from our animal instincts to our evolved human beings self in our whatever spiritual practice we may have, or emotional self-hacking, whatever you want to call it, meditation, etc. I think if each of us as an individual, before we go to the collective that can suck us in so well, and this is what the topic of tonight is. Imagine a society where we actually educated our children how to strengthen and embolden the aspects of ourselves that are spiritual, that are emotional, that are consciousness, that are caring, and not only in the token, statements that we make to each other, but in actual practice, and to know and be able to reflect on yourself and see if you're operating from fear or you're operating from love, and be able to switch off and on that switch. Imagine if we had that training and we could refer to the society and say, look at so-and-so's book, and we all read that book in 20 or 30 years from now. Maybe we won't have the ability of this cult mentality, this dictatorship, to take a hold of ourselves in such relative ease and so much, what's the word, sichafon, like when a flood comes over us and just carries us down the river and we don't even know where we are, that we can stay rooted in love, in hope, in strength, in menschlichkeit.
That's so amazing.
That's what? Can you repeat that?
Continue. I said that's really, no, I said that's amazing. And I love that you're highlighting the balance of the individual and the collective, because we do have to focus on what's within, not just look to others for answers. I think that's really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like Patrick to share some thoughts, Patrick, about your work as a body worker, as a dancer, about contact improvisation. And my metaphor is contact improvisation, for those who know it, is about community and connection, where individualism is about, in the end, being your best. Or let's say it can lead to elitism. I am the better than you. And I struggle myself with the individual and the community. Where is this integration of the individual and community? And for me, it is a dialectic of love, that when the individual is in love, they can love themselves more and they can love the other more. There's not a denial of one or the other. And part of the problem with our Constitution, written largely Federalist Papers 10, 11, 12, was written about elitism. It's written about how we can't represent ourselves. We need to have these other people represent us. And that's where a bifurcation in our democracy occurs between the individual acting out of consciousness in a community versus the individual.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. And so that's really the challenge for me is I believe in the individual liberation of the spirit, but within a context of others coming together. And Patrick, I'd love for you to talk about that in the context of your work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick. I've been, Artemis and I went to college together, and we've been, I'm a dancer and a holistic health person, and been very involved with how to stay in the body in order to live life. I also have my daughter in a bath right now, and she's, you know, so I'm a little bifurcated myself at the moment. But yeah, I mean, you know, we have a very, and I'm Batman tonight. Oh, you should have seen me with my mask. For all those who came on the call early, I was in my mask. You know, I think what Sydney was saying about, you know, holistic thought, and many of us, of course, are very steeped in it, and is that we're really, it's about a Taoism. We're not, you know, even some people were saying, well, the animal body is different than the spiritual body, and, you know, the animal body leads us to hell, which is what we've all been taught. You know, none of it, you know, we all know it's not true also, and we just are all still in the old language, and we're, you know, we're trying to find the new way. But, you know, a big piece of how not to get sucked up into conspiracy theories and cults and is to stay in the body. And it's very helpful. And we really have to, you know, listen to each other. We have to respect each other. We have to create boundaries, but we also have to listen to boundaries. And so we always have to be involved in our spiritual development, which most of us are very steeped in. So I'm not saying anything new, but I think it's very important. It's very hard. I mean, God, I'm humbled every day with my own growth. And, you know, I lost a new friend recently that I really liked, because after about a year of knowing him, he started telling me his, you know, he's an independent, and he started showing me these videos of these independents really who are basically into conspiracy theory, and who are basically, you know, really, I think, Republicans ultimately. And so he showed one video, and the last time he showed one video, and it had something about AOC making a certain vote. And I said, I looked it up on the internet, and I said, no, she voted the exact opposite way that these two characters who have a podcast said that she voted. And that this podcast that was on all sorts of ideas and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that was the primary focus. And I pointed it out to him. No, this is incorrect. This is a fact. She did not vote this way. And this podcast is based on the fact that she did vote this way. And he said, well, there's a much bigger picture going on, and you don't understand, and blah, blah, blah. And then that was the last conversation I ever had with him. You know, I challenged him, and I did what was right for me, you know, and I didn't want to lose the friendship, but it's very sad for me that this is the world that we live in, that, you know, we can't listen to each other. We stop dialogue. We slam down the phone. We shut off conversation. But that's what happens sometimes when we're true to ourselves. So, and I want to thank Juret and Noam for bringing music, and Amelie for singing and holding our hand to our chest or our belly. How lovely. And I think that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
naturally, and I don't want to guide the conversation. So before I ask a question to the group, I'd love anyone who has not yet to introduce themselves if they would like to, either via coming on video or unmuting or through the chat here. If anyone would like to share, this is a great opportunity. We have about 30 minutes left for tonight's call.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi. Yeah, this is Sonia. I'm Dret's daughter and Artemis's goddaughter. And
Hi,
yeah,
Sonia.
hi, Mama. It's been great to listen in. One of the threads, I guess, I've been noticing, or I just wanted to pick up on, was the concepts, just talking about love and fear and how that's related to racism. I think I've just been noticing so much, like in so many of the really racist things I've been reading, there's so much fear. And I think that comes back to, to what people were talking about earlier about like the disaffected white working class. And like, I think that disaffection has really been like co-opted, I guess, in a way to really to turn that frustration and feed it with racist ideology that is really detrimental overall to working people, because like racial justice is really closely tied up with economic justice, which is really in everyone's best interest, or in all working people's best interest. And last night I was listening in to the squad, Ilhan Omar and AOC and Rashida Tlaib, and they had lots of different people coming in, and there was just so much joy and love in the whole conversation. And it's so striking how the way that so many of those women who have been incredible leaders in Congress have been portrayed in the media, and who are constantly attacked is like through this angry, fearful lens. And yet the way they speak and the energy that they bring is so joyful and loving. And I think like racism distorts our perception of each other in a way that makes it so we can't see how our humanity is bound up in our, like how our liberation is bound up in each other. And I think what Artemis was saying about individual liberation and collective liberation, like it's important for those things to go hand in hand, because when it's imbalanced and too much of the effort is just on making structural changes without changing people's lived experiences and hearts and understanding, then those systems just get twisted, and and then we end up with things like mass incarceration and all these reinventions of the same tools, but just in different ways. And
it's interesting you bring that up. Right before you introduced that, I was talking about information ecology, or the system of sharing information. And for me, I look at the world as it's kind of tilted in the direction of monetization, and information ecology is what's going on behind the information sharing. What is the agenda behind the bulk of the information that is being shared today? Is it love? Is it unity? Or is it commoditization? And in many ways, I see Trump as like a campaign that went wrong, like a brand that just kind of failed.
I want to add something about racism, and Chris Oath mentioned this book Caste, which I think is one of the great books about not just racism, but how we create institutional forms of domination over people, not just for economic purposes, racist purposes, but if you think about America as a caste system, the way we think of India as a caste system, and then we start to look at caste systems around the world, we start to see where on the most extreme sides of caste, you have these cults. And when the rules become more important than the people, when the rules become more important than liberation, when the rules become about conformity, then you have a loss of individual power. And when you lose that sense of dignity, you are in a caste system of some kind. And I think, Chris, if you could speak to that book a little bit and why you're excited about the metaphor of the caste system in this conversation.
Do we have Chris? Chris, you are muted.
Chris, you're muted.
Hi. No longer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I just have to, that book, which I'm actually listening to an audiophile, you know, but I go on my walks in nature and I'm listening to some pretty horrific stuff. And I'm near the end of the book. I mean, the Nazis, when they were first formulating what they were going to do with the Jews, looked to what was going on in America and thought it was too extreme. You know, I mean, but they modeled their system after what was happening in the American, not just the South, but mostly in the South. So anyway, I recommend that. But I want to
share a little more about the caste system in that book and what we're talking about. Like,
well,
make a parallel.
The structure of society. I remember as I was reading the book or listening to the book, I thought of my parents. And really, you know, you get into your own system. I mean, I was born in North Carolina. I'm sure my ancestors were slave owners. So it hits home, hearing some of these stories. And then I think my father, who was, you know, born, you know, raised in Manhattan, was so fixated on who's who in the East and all these who's books on who's on what social register and that sort of thing. This is back in the 20s and 30s or 40s, you know. And I think that's all part of the same caste system, anchored by people of color at the bottom. And you think of, I thought of, it makes me think of the cliques in high school. How much of a human thing is it to want some kind of stratification and find your place there? And I wonder if I can bring it back to this whole Trump thing, and not Trump himself, who I think he's just a tool that went awry. I think the Republican Party really represents the 1% and corporations, and they have to, you know, go into the kind of issues that are going to get them votes, because what they really represent is not popular. So they have to figure other things to get them votes, like abortion and these other things, and the fear of immigrants that and racism. But they don't care about that. It's just a tool, and Trump is just a tool, which is a different caste. It's how I think of it. Am I digressing a little too much here?
I find it relevant. Thank you.
So
I wonder, I could jump in. I mean, I appreciate Chris.
no, go ahead, jump in.
You know, I see kind of related to what you're saying. Also, there's a question that came in the chat about, you know, like what are the tools? Like, how can we bring back a sense of humanity from this kind of, you know, this precipice that we're on as a nation right now? And I think it's such a beautiful question. And, you know, there's something about, I have to say, I don't think I'll ever, I think when Sid said just a moment ago about, you know, Trump, this picture of like Trump as a failed brand, you know, this like commodification gone awry, that like totally resonates with me. Like, you know, Chris, you were just talking about, you know, that in a way he's a puppet. You know, like there's so.
On a rhyme.
Say it again, Chris.
Well, I don't. He just went off and all. You know.
Yeah.
He's a total monkey wrench in the machinery.
Right. He's a wild cannon. You know, just like who knows what will happen. But there is something connected, I think, to the commodification. Like I had an extraordinary conversation actually yesterday. You know, I do cult awareness education and I talk with a lot of people about cults, and, you know, I had someone who wanted to, you know, talk about a group that he was involved in and, you know, to try to get a sense as to whether or not this group could be redeemed. And it was the first time that I've had a conversation with someone who had concerns about cultic stuff. And the conversation became like, oh gosh, dude, you're not dealing with a destructive cult. This is like, yes, there's some issues, but this is like life. This is the good stuff. You know, you can take a group that maybe has some traits to it that are not so good and, you know, tear it apart and, you know, bring a level of transparency. You know, this is part of, I don't know if Sonia is still on this call or not, but, you know, some of the work that she does has to do with, you know, working with organizations to bring transparency and, you know, and integration and diversity and all of, you know, the richness of life. So I think that, you know, that's part of it. And there's also this, like, so it was really fun for me yesterday to like be able to say to somebody, gosh, you know, like this isn't a cult because people are not being harmed. The group that he was describing, yeah, there were some hard things about it, but people's livelihoods were not being destroyed. People's sense of people's, you know, personality, people's, you know, people weren't being sexually abused or, you know, financially abused. So like that commodification that Trump is bringing in, I think is part of, you know, part of how he is causing harm to individuals. So that's one of the ways that we can most help people right now as we're looking, no matter what happens on, you know, Tuesday. We can reach out to our fellow neighbors and friends and family and try to find those places where, especially those who think differently from us, in terms of their political allegiance, you know, to recognize that that they may have been harmed, and to ask questions. You know, like, depending on your relationship with them, you know, like their livelihood, their understanding of, you know, for example, a lot of Christians struggle with the fact that there is somebody in the White House who is so overtly, you know, coarse and undignified. Like that does hurt Christians. So to have a conversation about that and to let them know that they're not judged, to reckon with your own judgments yourself, and you have to do that first. And you know, before I stop tonight, I wanted to. Is it okay if I just say one more thing, Artemis?
Yeah, of course.
I wanted to tell you about a movement that we've started that came about from this beautiful synchronicity of people, with Steve Hassan and Mark Laxer being two key people. You know, we've created the equivalent of the Me Too movement for cult survivors or people who have been impacted by cults. And so I just wanted to be on your radar. It's called #IGotOut. So wherever you see that hashtag, and you know, what we're doing is we're creating an environment where people who have experienced group harm to tell their story in the same way that people who have been, you know, experienced sexual abuse or sexual harassment started to tell their story. And that story, you know, owning our individual experiences and moving into that collective consciousness, we get to see each other as peers, and we get to learn from each other, and we get to change the world, quite frankly. So I just wanted to say that. And Artemis, I'm turning it back over to you.
Oh. Well, I am blown away by our conversation. There are a few people. Edna has not introduced herself, or Tina is on the phone. I want to just make a space for Edna and for Tina to just introduce yourselves and share what you've been inspired by and what questions you have. So I think you have to unmute yourself, Edna.
I'm 82 years old. I've always been interested in politics from the time I was 14 in the 1952 election. I'm obviously very interested in this one, appalled in many, many ways. I was born in Europe in 1938. That pretty much says it all. And I never in my life imagined that I would ever see anything like I've been observing in this country ever since that man got elected. So that's me.
And
I'm curious, how did I get on your list?
I don't know. I'm very glad you did, but I don't know.
Okay.
Nice to meet you, Edna.
Thank you.
And Tina, would you introduce yourself? Where's Tina?
She may have signed off.
She seems to be coming on, I think.
She unmuted herself, but we're not hearing you, Tina.
We'd love to see you, Tina.
Tina's an old roommate. We've known each other almost 40 years. I hope she doesn't mind me saying that. Between 30 and 40.
I didn't know that connection, Chris.
We're dancers together. This is the dancing part of the community. You, Tina. Tina, are you there? You're
muted, Tina. You're muted. Oh, here you are. Here you aren't.
Well, you look great, but we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Click the bottom of your screen. Look at the bottom of your screen.
Well, she already did.
Bottom left. Look at the bottom left of your screen.
The bottom,
Say
yeah.
stop video and mute, unmute.
No, she took it off.
Yeah, unmuted, but we still can't hear you. You could put it in the chat if you'd like. We'd love to see your words.
Tina, I left you messages in the chat.
Well, I just want to say Thank you, everyone, for this incredible conversation. We're going to go out with a little bit of music. I want to preview tomorrow's show. Rolling with Artemis is initiated tonight. So this is our first inaugural show. You've been part of something very special. Thank you, Sydney and Patrick, for putting this together. And thank you, Jarrett and Mark and all the others who agreed to speak. Larry Rothstein, there's so many wonderful contributions people made. Our vision with this is to really open a dialogue for us, our community, to have conversations about what inspires us. How do we be more active participants in our democracy? And more importantly, what is our spirit telling us about our role in society? What can we do? For me, it's about education. I also want to create a new crypto security based on love called Love Coins. It's a very unique concept of basically equalizing every relationship. And a love coin is about equal time. So you give me a half an hour, I give you a half an hour, and we share equality in our relationships. And I'm also creating a new crypto security around food and agriculture that will help more money stay in the farmers' hands by giving them a currency to trade with rather than US dollars. So my vision is really, how do we revolutionize our culture to be what we believe it to be, as a cooperative, interdependent, not independence, but interdependent. And how do we rewrite our Constitution to say all beings are created equal, not just all men are created equal? And really, that's what I'm pointing toward, is a redefinition of ourselves, not just as Americans or Democrats, but really to dream big and say, what is the possibility here? One of the guests we're going to have in 2 days is fighting for a new amendment to the Constitution to take money out of politics. Those are the kind of initiatives we're interested in, where we really bring democracy back to the grassroots. And we really look at Jeffersonian democracy in a new light, where we look at the town meetings of Vermont as models for town meeting government in local community. And this was the Green Party movement, which was act locally, think globally, that you're in these two worlds together. And really, that's the democracy I want to facilitate. You know, the original Revolutionary War was organized by a committee of correspondents. It was a democratic way, based on the Iroquois nation, to how to organize the revolution. And really, if we had taken that model of the committees of correspondence and made that our political system, the elitism, the cultism would not be there, in my opinion, because it would be more human-based. So I'm a kind of a radical democracy person. Amy Goodman, I don't know if you know that name. These kind of figures of how do we bring democracy into every aspect of our lives, not just politics? How do we make our homes more democratic? How do we empower our children more democratically? How do we become, as old men and women, more democratic? And that's really the spirit of this whole journey that we're on. So, you know, I'd love any other comments before we close out. We have some music that we're going to dance to. This is this is Halloween. And I don't know if you noticed that I'm dressed in a little bit of a, I don't know if you can guess who I am, but my costume is Zorro. Remember Zorro? So that's my costume for tonight. But anyway, we're gonna dance with some music. But before we go dance, Sydney, what final thoughts? Everyone's invited to say a few words, just as final thoughts before we say goodbye.
Well, I just wanted to say kind of what's happening in the next 4 days, but a little more specifically. So tomorrow we have Latifa Woodhouse talking about immigration and new vision of immigration. And then we also have Tim Phillips talking about polarization and the neuroscience of polarization. So that will be tomorrow night from 7 to 9. And then on Monday, we're talking about really focused on voting. So the Florida vote. And then we have Jeff Clements coming in to talk about the 28th amendment, ratifying the 28th amendment about getting big money out of politics and overturning Citizens United. So that's Monday from 7 to 9. Tuesday is election day. So Artemis will be at the polls and
With my mask.
With his mask, talking to people. Also in Massachusetts, we have Amendment 2, which is about ranked choice voting, which is really leading us into multi-party elections and campaigning in a positive way and just simply more democratic choice. And we don't have to, strategically vote. We vote for our true preference, and it's a better way of voting. And then you'll be on the show with Lorenzo, also continuing to just talk with voters about what's happening out in the voting polls. And then finally on Wednesday, we'll see where we are, whether we're celebrating and dancing in the aisles, or are we grieving, or are we probably most likely still counting? And what do we need to get out in the streets and start demonstrating? So that will be Wednesday, all 7 to 9.
Yeah.
All at this same link that you came on today with. You just plug in.
Yes, and also all of these events, all of these meetings will be recorded and on YouTube, on Artemis's new YouTube channel. And please, anything that you can do right now, obviously any efforts count right now. Invite people to the events. If you found this event through Facebook, that same event page has the links to all the upcoming events. So if you go there, click it, click going, and invite your friends, that would mean a lot to, who knows, we'll see what happens, but please, anything helps.
I'm putting the link for this. It's the same link for all the events in the chat, so you can know what it is, save it for yourselves, and give it out to your friends.
I'd like to just say thank you, Artemis and Patrick and Sid and all the people here to convene a community that exudes of hope. And just, if you don't mind, before the music, a little music. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Noam.
Thank you all so
When you
much.
come next time, Noam, I want you to start the circle off with us drumming, okay?
Okay.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you for having us and me,
Yes.
and inviting us and convening this.
Beautiful.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you, David. And can we go out with a little bit of Black Eyed Peas, Where is the Love?
And we encourage everyone
Absolutely.
to actually move and dance.
Move and dance. Here we go. Where is the love? And you can drum. You can drum, Noam. Where is the love?
Can't hear the music.
Can you hear it?
Coming on.
Can you hear it? No? Is it coming through?
Yep.
Mama, people living like they ain't got no mama. Only attracted to things that bring the trauma. Overseas, yeah, we trying to stop terrorism, but we still got terrorists here living in the USA, the big CIA.
Can you hear the music?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey.
But love with your own ways, then you only leave space to discriminate, and to discriminate only generate hate. And when you hate, you're bound to get irate. Madness is what you demonstrate, and that's exactly how anger will operate.
Thank you all so much for being on tonight. And I just want to say thanks again to Jarrett for sharing and for hoping people to get out. Hashtag I got out.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Artemis. Thank you, Patrick. Lovely to meet you all.
Bye, everybody.
Susan, Dara, it's wonderful to see your name on here too. I just have to say, I love you, dear. Bye-bye.
All right, Noam, drumming.
Oh, we love you.
Bye.
Bye.